Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Levi Omagbemi. In this video, we are going to build a program that generates quotes randomly. So before we start building this program, I want to show you how this program works and outline some of the steps we are going to take to build this program. I'll go ahead and reload this page, and the first thing the program does is to prompt the user to enter their name. So I'm going to enter my name here and click OK. Now, I'm going to select a quote category. We have just 5 categories in this program. I'm going to go with leadership quote and click generate. And at each point I click this button, it's going to generate a new quote. I can decide to change this leadership quote to success quote. And it generates quotes based on this category. Now, I want to show you some other features of this program. I'm going to reload again to start the program afresh. This time, I'm not going to enter my name. I'll cancel this, and I'm just going to select a quote category. Let's do educational quotes and click generate. So it's going to tell me to enter my name to proceed. So it's compulsory that you must enter your name to generate a quote. So I'll click OK and enter my name. Now that I have my name here, I can generate a quote. So you see, it's working now. One last feature I want to show you is that after entering my name, and for some reason I forgot to select a quote category, if I click generate, the program is going to remind me by saying my name and say please select a quote category. So now I know that I have to select a quote category for this program to work. And you see, it works. So this is the program we are going to be building. Now for the steps we are going to take to build this program, we are just going to write HTML and JavaScript. We are going to be using Bootstrap to style this program. Now for our JavaScript side of the program, we are going to take 4 steps, and for some of the steps, there are going to be additional steps inside. So we are going to define all the variables we need at the top of the program. We are going to prompt the user to enter their name. We are going to fetch the quotes, and then we are going to trigger the application to generate a quote. So let's start building this program. Alright, so we are going to start building this program, and I already created a folder on my computer, and I have this JSON file inside. So this JSON file is where we are going to store our codes. So if I go through this file, you see that we have one big object here, and inside the object we have arrays for each code category. So JSON is just a format for storing data. So if you are going to add more code category and codes to this application when we are building it, it means we are going to follow this format. So for example, let's say you want to add business codes, you have to put a comma, and then so this is how you can add more codes, and inside this array you can start adding each code as an item. So the way I'm doing this is that I'm using the code category as a property for each quotes array. Alright, so I'm going to go over here and create my HTML file. So index, and I'm going to put down my boilerplate, and for the title I'm just going to say random code generator, and I'm just going to put an empty div here with a class of container. save this, and then I'm going to go live with live server. So live server is just an extension that runs your program on the web. It launches it on the web browser, and each time you make a change, instead of you to reload your browser to see the change, live server will do that automatically for you. I'm just going to go live, and the server is starting. Yeah, so I think the server is up now, so it should be opened on my browser. Yeah, so this is it. So we don't have anything here, and that's because we just have a div inside our HTML document. So before I start writing the HTML code, I'm just going to open a new tab here and visit Bootstrap website. So Bootstrap 5, this is the latest version of Bootstrap. So if you remember, let's use this, let's use the latest version. So if you remember, I said we'll be using Bootstrap to style this program. So we are going to copy the CDN link. So we need to copy this link. We need to copy this link. I'm going to copy it, go to my code editor, and we are going to paste it just before the title, and we are going to go back to the browser again, and this time we want to copy the script, because there's some styling that will not work if we don't include this script tag at the bottom of our HTML file. So let's go back to our editor, and I'm going to paste this below this div. So I'm going to save this. Now let's start typing our HTML. So the first thing we are going to do is to have a container. Let's have another container. I'm just putting a comment here, greeting. And so inside this div, we are going to have an h2, and for this h2, I'm just going to say hello Levi for now. Let's apply some Bootstrap classes. So I'm going to say my3. So I'm just adding margin vertically of 3. So if I save this, and let's just see what this looks like. So you see, this is what we currently have. All right, so let's go back to our code editor, and let's continue writing our program. So I'm going to have a comment here for the header, and a div also. And for the header, okay, so I think it's better for me to use HTML semantics tag. So I'm just going to change this to header instead of using a div. That's better. I'm going to give it a class of heading, and we are going to have an h1 inside. And for this h1, I'm just going to enter the title of the program, random code generator, and let's give it a class of h1. Let's see what it looks like. Make sure I save, and let's see how it looks like. Yeah, so this is what it looks like now. Let's go back to our code editor, and I'm going to have our select input now. So there are different ways you can provide a user with options, provide options for a user in an application, web application. But the way we are going to do this is that instead of using a select drop down, the most popular way is to use select, the select tag, and we're just going to have options inside. And let's say, for example, leadership. I'm just going to put leadership. Let's copy this down and have excuse me, success, and yeah, let's just have education. So if I save this and so make sure I save and go back to my browser, you see we have this drop down here. Also it's empty, and the reason why it's empty is because we also have to put something in between. So I'm just going to say leadership, and over here success and education. So if I save this and let's see, so you see we have leadership, success, and education. But if you look at the program I showed you, you can actually select and at the same time type. So we are going to use a select input, and the way we are going to do that is to use an input tag and a data list tag combined. So I'm going to get rid of this, just put a div here, and we are going to have an input. So because we want this input to be tied with our data list where we are going to have the different code categories, I'm going to put an attribute of list here. So it means we want to use this as an input list, and I'm going to put the value of this attribute as quote category and then list. For the name, I'm just going to say quote category. Let's just break this down so it looks more neat. And for the ID, I'm also going to say quote category. But this time I'm just using an hyphen to separate both words. And then let's give it a placeholder, and we're going to say enter a select rather select a quote category. And then I want to give it a bootstrap class of form control, a class form control. And this class is just going to make this input span across the width of the whole page. So let's see what this looks like. Yeah, so this is what we currently have. So we need to tie this now to a data list tag. Let's go back to VS Code, and just below this input, we are going to have a data list. Data list. And where we are going to tie this data list to the input is that we are going to set the ID to the same value of the list attribute. So it means the ID for this data list tag is going to be quote category list. That's all we need to do. So we can start adding some options. So for the first one, we want love quotes. Love quotes. And I'm just going to copy this down. We have 5 of it. One more time. And then we are going to have success quotes, leadership quotes, educational quotes, and then some life quotes. Let's save this, make sure I save, and let's switch over to our browser. So yeah, so this is what we have. So if I select, I can select, and you can see I can also type. So we just created a drop down that we can select options and can also type at the same time. Cool. So you can do that using an input tag and a data list tag. Let's go back to VS Code, and the next thing we are going to do is to put a div. So I'm going to put a comment here and just say quote display, because this is where we are going to be displaying our quotes, and this is going to happen from the JavaScript. It's going to be dynamic. So I'm just going to say class, and let's say let's give it a margin vertically 3, and I'm going to say alert. So these are all Bootstrap classes, and alert success. And inside this div, we are going to have a p tag, and I'm just going to give it an ID of quote output. And I'm going to leave it empty. The reason why I'm leaving it empty is because we are going to add the content of this p tag dynamically from our JavaScript. But let me just say success and save this. So we'll switch over to our browser and see what this looks like. So this is what it looks like. So we're slowly building up our program. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Too much space here. And now we're going to have a div, and I'm just going to put a comment here, and this will be for our buttons. I'm going to say trigger, because this is what is going to trigger the whole application. So we're going to have a button. Just tap this over, and for the button we are going to say generate. That's what we want. And let's add some Bootstrap classes. So we are going to say btn primary, because we want this to be a blue color. So the primary color for Bootstrap is blue. So btn primary will make this button blue. And I'm going to change the display to block, and I want the width to be 100%, because I want it to take full width of the page, and I'm going to give it an ID of trigger. Let's also add a margin here. So let's see. Yeah. So I think this is all for our HTML. I think I want to add some space at the top. So I'll go back to my code editor here, and let's do margin just on the top, so empty. Yeah. So you see we have more space at the top. All right, so that's all for our HTML. Now we're going to move on to the JavaScript. So I'm going to create a JavaScript file, app.js, and then we need to link this file. So just after this Bootstrap script, we're going to have another script tag, and we're going to link it to app.js. save. So now let's start writing our JavaScript code for this program. So the first thing I'm going to do is to grab all the elements we need from the DOM. So we'll be needing this quote category, the input. We're also going to be needing the quote output. We're also going to be needing this trigger, and then we're also going to be needing this heading here, because remember the name is supposed to be dynamic, but we are just putting my name here. Okay, so let's go back to our app.js, and I'm going to say const. So I'm going to grab my quote category, and remember it has an ID of quote category. So I'm just going to copy this down one more time, and we are going to have quote output and change here to output. We also have the trigger. So I'll just select this trigger, and it has an ID of trigger. I always forget putting semicolon, so I need to put semicolon there, and then we are going to just put a name output here. So name output, we don't have that yet in our HTML document. So I'm going to say document dot get element by ID, and let's just call this name output. I'm going to save this and go back to my HTML file, and instead of writing my name here, I'm going to put a span, and that span is going to have an ID of name output. It has to match with the ID we are using in our JavaScript, because that's how we're going to get it from the DOM. So we're just going to leave this empty. We're going to add the text content dynamically according to the user input. So now let's have the username here. So what we are going to do is to prompt the user to enter their name, and we can use that. We can do that using this prompt function. So prompt, and let's enter a message. Let's say enter your first name. You just want their first name. So I'll save this, and if I go back to my browser, you see it's now telling me to enter my first name. So I can enter my name here and click OK. But nothing's happening. See, we are not getting the name here because we have not added that. All right, so let's go back to our JavaScript file and continue building. So the first thing we want to do is to fetch the quote. So we want to fetch the quote. Now, while fetching the quote, we also want to display the name of the user to them. So I'm going to say fetch quote. Let's put a comment here. Fetch quote on DOM load. So when the HTML and CSS loads on the browser, that's where we want to fetch the quote. So we are going to do that using document.add event listener, and we are going to listen for a DOM content loaded event. I'm just going to pass in a callback here to write down the instructions of what I want to happen when the DOM loads. So the first thing we want to do is to display the username to them. So you can say name output, the text content, and set it to username. Then we are going to use the fetch API to get the quotes. So fetch, and because we have this file in the same directory, we are just going to say quotes.json, and then I'm going to do dot then. So this is how you use the fetch API and data, and want to return a JSON because this is a JSON format. So we're going to return data.json. Then we're going to call another dot then, and we're going to get the value. Um, yeah, so we're going to get the value. I'm just going to put another bracket in here. So what do we want to do with the value? We want to set our quotes to the value. So I'm going to define a variable here and say let quotes, and here we are going to set quotes equals to value. So if I should log quote on the console, let's go to our browser, and this time, so when I enter my name and click OK, you see my name is showing here, and if I open my console, you have an object. So an object containing all the quotes. So I think when I modified the file, I did not save this. I'm going to go back to my JSON file and remove this business quote because I don't I don't want business quotes. If you want, you can do that. Let's go back to let's go over here and get rid of this business quote. All right. So I also want to handle errors. So let's say for some reason the file was not able to be fetched. This fetch function was not able to fetch the file. So I'm going to say catch in case of any error, to catch any error during this process. And let's just pass in a callback. Then I'm just going to display the error, or let's just let's just display the error. Let's just display the error for now to the console. All right, so that's all we need to do for now. Now, following the steps we highlighted at the beginning, the next thing we need to do is to trigger the application to generate code and display that code to the user. So I'm just going to put another comment here and say trigger application to generate code. So I'm going to take this trigger button and grab it from the DOM and say trigger dot add event listener, and want to listen for a click event. So I'm also going to use an arrow function. So, but if you remember, we want to only generate quotes when there is a username. So if the user enters a value for their name, so we're going to say if username, or let's do it this way, let's say if not username, then we are going to say alert. So we are going to use the alert function to display a message to the user and say it's very hard for me to type and talk at the same time. So enter a username, or let's say enter your first name, and then we are going to prompt the user again to enter their name. So we are going to say username. So I can just go up here and grab this line. We are just resetting the variable to a new value because we are using let. That's why we are using let to declare this variable and not const, because it's not a constant value. It's going to change from time to time during our program. So enter your first name. Let's save this and let's try it out. So I'm just going to click cancel and try to generate a quote. That's not working. So let me make sure I save that. Yeah, and let me also make sure I have the ID correct. So ID is equals to trigger document dot get element by ID, and so yeah, I should. So let's try this out. Cancel this and try to generate a code. So it's saying enter your first name first, and if I click OK, it's going to prompt me to enter my name again. And now we have to display the name because JavaScript will execute from top to bottom. So at each point, we have to tell the application what to do. So we also need to display the name, and we can do that by just, let's return this function. Or we're not actually going to return it, because if you return it, this function is going to stop. So I'm just going to use another if statement here within this if statement and say if username, because we are prompting the user in here within this if statement. So if username, I'm going to say the name output. So we're going to take this name output, just exactly this line here, and paste it. Let's try it now. So enter your name first. I'm going to cancel and let me try to generate a code. Says enter your name first. And now if I say Levi, yeah, but I'm not going to click it again, because if I do, I'm going to get an error or nothing is happening because we are not doing any other thing to generate code. Let's go back to our code editor. So now we need to generate the quote. So if there's a username, we need to generate a quote. But before we generate a quote, we also know that the quote category has to have something. So I'm going to say we're going to handle that if the user does not select a quote category, the quote category dot value. That's how we do this in JavaScript to get the value of this input right here. We're selecting it from the DOM quote category. So we just have to say dot value to get whatever the user inputs into that input tag. Okay, so we're going to say if not quote category, then we're going to alert, we're going to send a message to the user, and I'm going to use template string because I want to put a variable within this alert function. I'm going to say username, so username, and say please select a quote category. So we are saying if the user does not select a quote category, tell the user to select a quote category. And then here we want to return this function. We just want to return this function. Let's return this function here because we want it to end, because we are going to put a function here that will generate the quote after this if statement. So if this if statement is true, if it's true that the user does not select a code category, then we just want to tell them to select a code category and end this whole function. We're also going to return here. We're also going to return within this if statement too, because after displaying the name, yes, we are going to return. Also going to return here. Right, so let me save this and let's try it again. So I'm going to enter my name, and I'm not going to select a quote category. I'm just going to try to generate a quote. Why is that not working? So let's just cross check. I'm just going to make sure I save. If not quote category dot value, please select a quote category. Let's try one more time. Oh, so I think the issue we're having is because we're returning here after setting the output. So let's get rid of that. Wow. So I'm just trying to walk you through the process of building this. I'm just building this all over again, and that's why. So let's just enter the name, click OK. I need to fade in my browser now. So I just entered my name. So let's try to generate. This is supposed to work now. So I'm going to go back to my code and let's see what's wrong. We're saying if not quote category dot value. Oh, so this has to be outside this if statement. It has to be outside this if statement. That's why it's not running. It has to be a separate if statement. Yeah. So if I fade in my browser now and try this. Still not working. Why is this not working? This is supposed to be working now, but let's just go to our program again and look. So if not username, alert user, enter your name. And if not quote category dot value, then we are alerting the user to enter a quote category, and then we are stopping the function. This is supposed to work. Just put a semicolon there. Quote category. So I'll just go back to my HTML to make sure I'm getting it right. Yes, leave the right ID, quote category. Quote category. I'm saying if not quote category dot value, alert and say please select a quote category. This is supposed to work. So let's try one more time. Yeah, so it works now. Say let I please select a quote category. Okay, So now the next thing we need to do is to generate the quote. We need to generate the quote. And I'm going to write a separate function to do that. I'm going to write a separate function to generate a quote. And so let's have a comment here. Generate quotes. And I'm going to call the name of this function generate quote also. Generate. And it's going to first taking the quote category. So we are going to say const quote category or selected category because we already have a variable named quote category here. Let's call this selected category. And then let's set it to quotes. So we want to take quotes. Remember, this quotes is an array. It's going to be an array of an object actually. It's going to be an object of arrays. So we can access based on the property by saying quotes and just use brackets, and we're going to say quotes category dot value. Yeah. Then the next thing we need to do is to generate a random number because we want a random quote. We want a random quote. I'm going to say const random num and then say math.floor. This is how we can generate random number with JavaScript. Math.floor, and inside we are going to have math.random, and we are going to multiply this with selected category dot length. So what we are doing is that we are generating a random number and we are rounding it down using math.floor. And the random number we are generating is from 0 to the length of selected category. So it's actually going to be, let's say we have 10 items here. So if we have 10 items in one array, it's going to be 0 to 9. Okay, so that's what we are doing here. And now we can take, let's take another variable here and call this random quote because we need to get the quote out. Call this random quote, and we're going to say selected category. We are taking the selected category now because this is now an array. This selected category is now an array because we have selected one of the category, for example, educational quote, just with this line of code, and this selected category is now an array. So we are going to pass in the random number as the index to get a random quote. Then the next thing we need to do is to display this quote. So we can say quote output dot value and set this to random quote. So let's try this out. So I'm going to put my name, and now let's select love quote and click generate. Oh, so we need to call that function. Let's go back to our code editor. We need to call this generate function now inside this event listener. So I'm going to call this generate quote function here. So now let's go back to our browser and try this out. So Levi as my name. Could not establish. So we are getting an error. Uncheck runtime. Could not establish connection receiving. So I'm just going to reload this again and try one more time. Okay, so let's go back to our code and see what we are doing wrong. So quote output. I just need to check all over again. Quote output. This time I want, we can remove this now because it's going to be dynamic. Quote output, and yeah, we're selecting get element by ID. We're generating it. So let's just, I think we should just log, for debugging purpose, let's log random quote and let's see the value of random quote. So we are not getting the value of random quote even when we click. Let's see why. So it means this function is not being called. It's not being called. We're saying if this if statement is not supposed to run because we have quote category. So now let's just log quote category dot value to make sure we are getting something. So this is how you can debug your, one way of debugging your JavaScript program. Oh, so we're getting it now. Yeah, so it's working now. I don't know why it will just work and won't work. I think it's the way the browser is loading. It's loading very slow. I don't know why my computer is so slow now. All right, but let's go back. Let's go back here. But quote output, did you notice that it's not setting? So let's go back to the browser. It's supposed to be showing here. Now that we are getting it, it's supposed to be showing here. It means something is wrong. Let's go back to our code editor. Quote output. Quote, oh, this is supposed to be text content and not value. Text content. So this should be the text content, not value. So if I save this and go back, I'm going to enter my name. Let me just reload this one more time and make sure I save. So I'm going to enter my name. Yeah, so we're getting it now. So I think it's the way the browser is loading. So anytime I get some funny error, I'm just going to reload this browser. Okay. So is the program complete? Let's try. There are some few things we want to undo. I'm going to cancel this. Try to generate. Say enter your first name. I'm going to say Levi. And try to generate. Say please select a code category. And let's clear this and select another category. So it keeps on generating new quotes at each time. Let's try another quote category. All right. So there are some few things I would like to do before we end this video. So let me switch back to my code editor. There are some few things I would like to do before we end this video. And one of those things is using functions to stop repetition. So if you see here, we are repeating ourselves by doing name output, and we also want to check if there is something before we display. So I'm going to have an if statement at the top here that's going to check if there is. I'm going to cut this and say if username, then want to display username. So I'm just calling a function here. I will have to create this function if username, then display username. So let's can come over here just below and say display username. And want to take username as an argument, as a parameter rather. And I'm just going to paste this line. So that's all we're doing for this function. We're just displaying the username. So anytime we want username, we're just going to call this function. So right here where we are displaying this username, can just say display username. I also think we can do the if statement inside. So we can say if username. Let's do the if statement inside here. If username, then we are just going to display username. So we can just get rid of this if statement here and call display username here. Also get rid of this if statement here. Yeah, so we are displaying the username. But what if username is equals to nothing? So there are lots of things we can handle, but I'm going to leave that to you. Try to handle that yourself. Try to show creativity and add more functionality to this program. Let's say, for example, we want to capitalize the username. If there's username, want to capitalize username, we can do something like so. You can say username dot there's no capitalize function in JavaScript. In a programming language like Python, you can see capitalize dot capitalize, and just going to do that automatically for you. But in JavaScript, you have to do that yourself. So you can capitalize username by saying username. You can access the first index of a string just like you can do with an array. And I'm going to use the to uppercase function. This should be, and then I can say plus, and I'm going to say username dot slice and enter 1. So what we are simply doing is that we are taking the first letter of the username, changing it to uppercase, and then we are adding the other letter from the second letter to this. So I'm going to save this right now, and let's go back. Let's go back and see. So I'll switch to my and enter my name. So I'm going to enter with lowercase, so we see if it works. And I click OK. It seems to have an error. Let me just reload this. I'll click OK. That's not working. If username, so I'm just going to log username here. So let me switch back to my code editor so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to log username here to see if we are actually getting username. Oh, I have to put username here. Yeah, I need to accept it as an argument. So I think that will work now. Let's go back and try this. Ah, so I'm going to enter with lowercase letter, and you see we got it in title case, capitalizing the first letter and adding the others to it. So I'm going to try to generate, says Levi, please enter code category, and so one more thing I want to do before we end this program. Here where we are saying Levi, I need to do this too. I need to capitalize the username. So how are we going to do that? I'm just going to return from this return. I'm going to return this. So return this as a value. And then instead of saying username here, I'm going to say display username and take in username. Let's try that and see it works. Levi, try to generate, and it says Levi, please select a code category. And if you notice now, it is capitalized. Okay, so now I'll select a code category, and we can keep on generating codes. So there are a lot of things you can handle in this application. You can try to see if the user is adding white space to their name, or if the user is not adding anything to their name. I think we're handling that already. That's what if not username means. And if username does that, handle that for us. But you can handle white space. Try handling white space. You can do that by saying dot trim. You can say dot trim. Just add dot trim to username, and it's going to remove the leading and trailing white space from the string. So you can just go ahead and try that yourself and try other things. Try adding more quotes to this JSON file. So let's test run the program one more time. So I'm going to say success quotes. It works. Let's try love quotes. It works. So there's one more thing I want to handle. I just thought of this now, so it's very important to do it. And what we need to do is to say, so I'll go back to my code editor. Right here where we're saying code category dot value. So let's say the user, for some reason, if you look at our JSON file, this is in title case, meaning the first letter of each word is capital letter. But let's say the user, for example, types in lowercase letter or two. It means this is not going to work. So let me do it so you see. So let's go back to our browser, and instead of selecting, I'll just type love quotes. Let's generate. And you see we have an error here because it cannot access it. So we need to handle this. So I'll go back to my JavaScript code, And the way we can do that is by saying dot. So we have some string functions. We have to uppercase. We have, I think we have dot title. I can't really remember. So I'm just going to, this is what I do when I don't remember something. I'm going to open my browser and just search for, let's see if we have a dot title function in JavaScript. Title function in JavaScript. Let's see if we have that. So you see, we don't have that. It means we have to do the same thing. We can do dot to uppercase, dot to lowercase. So I think what we can do to make this easier, instead of, because when you try to build a program, you try to look for the most easiest way to do things. So I think the most easiest way to do things now is to come back here, to our JSON file here, and let's change all of this to lowercase. So I'm also going to change this to lowercase, 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 and to lowercase also, and save this. Then what we can do here is that here we're accessing the value, you can actually say to lowercase. By just doing this, we can access any of the data we want from this JSON file. Let's try this again. I'm going to switch to my browser. I have to come back here. I'm just going to enter my name and type love quotes in lowercase this time. So you see, it works. And if for any reason I select and you see it's in uppercase, it's saying cannot read. I think also we have another error. So let's go back and fix that. I think there's somewhere we have to add this dot lowercase to also. Don't really think there's anywhere. So here where we are displaying name, before I forget, after displaying the name, after asking the user to enter their name and displaying their name, we want to just return because we don't want it to generate quotes. But I think there's a place where we are prompting the user. We prompted, if not, yeah. So we are going to say if username. If not username, let's just do that if I forget. If username now, because we are prompting the user, then we want to display the name. And then return, we want to return because we want them to regenerate again, to click the generate button one more time again after entering their username. Alright, so lowercase, everything is in lowercase, lowercase, lowercase. So what you can also do is to just change everything here also to lowercase. That's better, to lowercase. No, I don't want it to be, I want it to be showing capital letter when it's showing. It's supposed to handle everything just by saying dot value to lowercase. Let's try it one more time. Yeah, so it works now. Let's I'll try to enter. Yeah, so everything works fine. So right guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to share with your friends, leave a like, leave a comment on the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks.